Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew, and welcome to Storyteller's Corner. This week we are going to the universe of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And we're going to be getting into one of the perennial debates within the Avatar fandom, namely, whether or not the character Aang made the right choice in allowing Fire Lord Ozai to live. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the story, I will catch you up with a very brief outline. In the Avatar world, there are 4 nations, each with an elemental affinity. We have the Earth Kingdom, the Air Nomads, the Water Tribe, and the Fire Nation. Some people within each of these cultural groups is able to bend or manipulate the element of their group, and it's treated as a martial art and has healing modalities, and all of this has evolved over time. It's very culturally significant. Now, one person called the Avatar, and there's only one at a time, is able to master all 4 elements, and the spirit of the Avatar has a cyclical reincarnation and is reborn into each nation in a predictable pattern. 100 years before the beginning of the story, the Fire Nation became very aggressive and started to invade its neighbors, and they wiped out the Air Nomads. Aang, who is an air nomad, escaped because he had run away from his people for unrelated reasons. Keep in mind, he was 12 at the time. He got caught in a storm, he ended up frozen in an iceberg for 100 years, and survived thanks to his avatar powers. So these 100 years pass, and then Aang is accidentally discovered and woken up by members of the Water Tribe, and in due course he's informed about what's happened, and he realizes that it's his destiny to restore the balance of the world, put an end to the war, master the elements, and become a fully realized avatar. That is his job description. So the story proceeds, and Aang learns a basic grasp of each element and the looming issue of how do you end the war, and what does defeating the Fire Lord mean exactly isn't something that's directly addressed and defined until we get into the final episodes. And it's then Aang has an absolute crisis as he realizes he can't put this off any longer and has to make a decision about what to do, because defeating the Fire Lord in time of war, well, I think we understand what that actually means. It means you're going to take the bastard out. And of course, being a 12-year-old boy, that's really not something he's going to be up for obvious reasons. So let's get into Aang's issues. It's multifaceted. For the first 12 years of Aang's life, he was raised at an air nomad temple, and the philosophy of the air nomads is loosely based on Buddhism. Aang considers himself primarily to be a pacifist. He ran away from his people because he didn't want to be the Avatar, and let's be honest, Aang did not like responsibility in general. And of course, being the Avatar is a huge responsibility. Now, the general consensus of Team Avatar is that in order to defeat the Fire Lord, Aang would need to kill him in all probability. He just needed to be prepared to take him out in the most permanent fashion. Understandably, Aang recoils from any such idea. By the end of the series, he's maybe 13-ish. In the 3rd season, if you've watched the series, you'll notice that the animator started drawing all the characters in a way that made them look slightly more mature. But certainly Aang would be no more than 13 by this point in the story. And Aang also clings to the idea that all life is sacred, no matter the circumstances. And he says that while he realizes that the Fire Lord is a terrible person and the world would probably be better off without him, he just can't do this. And, he can't, as the Avatar, just wipe out people he doesn't like, as if that's what that would be. And he says, well, what kind of Avatar would he be if he did that? And, okay, up to a point, fair enough. But this isn't about just killing someone you don't like. It isn't even just about killing a national leader during a time of war, particularly a prolonged war. What Fire Lord Ozai was up to in the final moments is that he was going to attack the Earth Kingdom on a day in which this comet would pass by the world, and the comet actually gives firebenders a huge increase in power. We're talking godlike. And Ozai was going to go full scorched earth. Plants, animals, people, doesn't matter. Ozai was going to burn them all. And by the time we see Aang getting around to confronting the Fire Lord, Ozai was already in the process of carrying out a scorched earth genocide of every living thing in the Earth Kingdom. In such extreme circumstances, I think the question is warranted: does the value of Ozai's life outweigh all the lives of his victims and would-be victims? And is Aang's stance that it's moral to find a way around this, to not have to kill Ozai? I mean, does that really hold up to scrutiny? Now, it's also worth pointing out that Aang rejected the counsel of everyone who told them that killing Ozai was going to be a matter of practical necessity. This includes the advice from his past selves, whom he's able to contact and converse with through meditation. He spoke with avatars who came from each of the nations, and in so many words, they each told him, if push comes to shove, Aang needed to end Ozai's life, preserve the world, that's his duty as the Avatar, and if that's what it takes to make the war stop, then them's the breaks, kids. Now, Aang was just beside himself, and again, he's young. This is perfectly understandable that, there's a reason why we do not send children to war or put them in a position of making wartime decisions. But, that's the story, and this is where Aang was. That's his situation. But thanks to a friendly lion turtle, whose existence in the story was mentioned only in passing once before in a previous season, he gave Aang a special bending ability that no one had ever heard of or had even been remotely alluded to, and this allowed Aang to take someone's bendings away so he could defeat the Fire Lord by taking his fire bending powers without having to kill him. And in addition to that, thanks to a remarkably well-timed event in his fight with Ozai, a pressure point on Aang was released that allowed him to fully access his avatar abilities. How very convenient. And Aang was able to miraculously remove Ozai as a threat without having to kill him. So he takes Ozai's fire-bending ability away, and this so broke Ozai's spirit that he lost the war, lost his throne, and peace was restored to the land. All that's missing is a cherry on top. So before we examine this chain of events any further, let's acknowledge that Avatar is a children's show, and as a general rule, we don't usually have our children's stories teaching children that it's going to be necessary to destroy life during a time of war, particularly if someone is engaged in a genocide. Let's also acknowledge again that Aang is 12, maybe 13, at the time, and of course none of us wants a kid that age to go around killing people, let alone put them into a position when the weight of the world is on their shoulders. All this being admitted, was it actually the course of wisdom to spare Ozai? Because even without his firebending abilities, the reality is he is still Fire Nation aristocracy. He still had the commanding respect and loyalty of many people within that nation. He was still a focal point of rebellion. Even without his bending, Ozai, as long as he breathed, would always be a potential threat to the world. Even more so because any action, if he was able to garner up support from this point, would be fueled by rage and revenge. So, was it wise for Aang to prioritize his beliefs over practical necessity, to prioritize his moral precepts over the lives of an entire nation for the sake of a war criminal? Now, if Aang had been 21 at the time of the story instead of 12, would we see his determination to spare Ozai as admirable, or would we see it as something else, something that would cast Aang into a bad light? So what would have happened? What would Aang have done if the lion turtle hadn't provided a bit of divine intervention at the end? If the lion turtle hadn't given Aang a solution that no one knew was a solution that would enable Aang to completely avoid the principal issue involved, that of stepping up to the plate, taking on the mantle of the Avatar, and doing what the world needed him to do, whether or not it suited his preferences. Avoidance is an ongoing issue for Aang. He tried to avoid becoming the Avatar. He tried to avoid people during emotional conflicts, particularly when he was in the wrong. And at the end, he literally tried to avoid confrontation with the Fire Lord because he couldn't think of a solution that fit within his child's understanding of air nomad philosophy. If you follow the continuing story through the comics and see the after effects of Aang's tenure as the Avatar in the show Legend of Korra, you'll find further examples of Aang avoiding his responsibilities and duties well into adulthood. He even helped found a community and set up systems that downplayed the role of the Avatar in the world, and in some ways made the office of the Avatar all but irrelevant, a legacy that his successor had to cope with. And even in his personal life, it was his wife who ultimately took the primary responsibility for raising the children while he roamed the earth doing whatever he felt like. And his adult children had deep-rooted issues amongst themselves because he favored the one child who had inherited his airbending abilities over and above the children who did not. Obviously, this causes problems, and I am sure throughout his entire life he found ways to avoid that being his fault in his own mind. The thing that really has always worked against Aang is that he was always an airbender first and foremost, which is a state of mind that is incompatible with his role as Avatar. Mastering the elements wasn't just a matter of learning the martial arts aspect, although that would be challenging in and of itself. But additionally, avatars took years to train, and they lived amongst the people and learned about their way of life and their philosophy and their beliefs, and he learned to apply the wisdom from many sources. That is what they were supposed to be doing before they fully took on their roles. Now, Aang's companions within the series, to one degree or another, did learn essentially the lesson he was supposed to learn. The non-bender of the group, Sokka, he learned the non-bending fighting styles of other nations. Katara adapted her style of waterbending many times and had her own personal ideological evolution. Toph invented a whole new form of bending, and Zuko had a redemption arc that's still the talk of storytelling circles, and also refined his bending capabilities while gaining a reformed world view. Everyone in the forefront of the story changed and developed and took something from their experiences with other cultures, except for Aang. Being the last airbender, feeling the guilt of leaving his people to his fate, and the terrible fate that they suffered, probably played a huge role in why Aang retained his very naive child's eye view of air nomad beliefs and this very black and white view of morality and the world. And I think this played into why he expected, even at the very end in extreme circumstances, that it was the world who needed to adapt to his ideals and that he had no obligation to adapt to anyone else because he was absolutely convinced of airbender morality superiority. He was the one character who desperately needed a wider view of the world in order to do his job, and he just so happened to be the character who evolved the least. This inflexibility does more to account for Aang's approach to dealing with Ozai than the vulnerability of his youthful years or his unnuanced belief system. Aang wanted the world as he had known it. He wanted adults back in charge so he didn't have to be, and he did his best to pretend that everything could be as it was and restored to what it had been, and he consistently reacted badly when reality contradicted his preferences, be it in the context of the war or within his personal relationships. In the end, Aang's decision to spare Ozai's life was rooted in a desire to escape a decision, to escape responsibility, rather than being motivated by morality alone. Now, could it have been written in such a way that Aang could have come to this decision to spare Ozai's life, and that it would have come across as honorable and clean and as this great moving moment of reconciliation? Could this have been done without the aid of one of the Avatar's world's de facto gods, without the cop-out of a brand new unknown form of bending? Possibly so. And that would have made for a better story. And if the live-action Avatar series does come to fruition, perhaps that is what we will see. Something that is a little bit more nuanced, something that is a little bit more reasonable and believable. Now, as far as the moral question, should Aang have spared Ozai or snuffed him out? My final take on the matter is this. The person who is in the act of committing genocide is not more important than the victims of that genocide. I see nothing moral in prioritizing the life of a murderous madman who initiated the use of force. The people who matter in that scenario are the people who are being aggressed upon, and if saving their lives means taking out a tyrant, fine and dandy. So, that is my argument on that particular Avatar fandom controversy. Let me know what you think, whether you're familiar with the series or not, because I think I did a good enough job giving you the outline of what the situation was and the issues involved. I'd love to hear about it. You can come see me at Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description box below, and we could have a nice conversation about it there. Or you could leave me a comment here below on the channel. But as always, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.